The silver locket caught the morning sun like a beacon as it lay half buried in the dust of the cattle trail. And when Cole Zimmerman dismounted to pick it up, he had no idea that this small piece of jewelry would change the entire course of his life. Cole turned the delicate piece over in his calloused hands, examining the intricate scrollwork etched into its surface. It was the kind of thing a man saved for months to buy, the kind of thing that meant something. He pressed the tiny clasp, and it opened to reveal two small portraits, painted with such care that he could make out every detail, even in the harsh light of the Iowa summer. On one side was a young woman with dark hair and eyes that seemed to look right through him. On the other was an older woman who shared her features, perhaps her mother. Behind the portraits, an inscription read, "To Flora with all my love, Mama, May 1873." It was now August of 1877, and Cole stood on the trail between Council Bluffs, Iowa, and the smaller settlements that dotted the landscape heading west. He had been driving cattle from his modest ranch to the stockyards when he spotted the glint of silver. Now, looking at this locket, he felt a strange pull in his chest. Someone had lost something precious, and he knew he had to find her. Cole was 24 years old, tall and lean from years of hard work, with sun-darkened skin and light brown hair that he kept short under his hat. He had inherited the ranch from his father 2 years ago and had been working himself to the bone trying to keep it running. Most days he was too tired to think about much beyond the next task, the next season, the next challenge. Romance had seemed like a luxury he could not afford. But now, standing in the middle of the trail with this locket in his hand, he felt something shift inside him. He carefully tucked it into his shirt pocket, right against his heart, and remounted his horse. The cattle could wait. He had something more important to do. The first place he tried was the general store in Council Bluffs. The town was bustling with activity as he rode in, wagons rattling down the dirt streets, women in their long skirts hurrying between shops, men conducting business on the wooden sidewalks. The Missouri River glinted in the distance, reminding him that this was still a frontier town despite its growing population. The store owner, a round man named Mr. Peterson, looked at the locket with interest. "That is a fine piece," he said, adjusting his spectacles. "But I cannot say I know who it belongs to. Flora, you said. There are several Floras around these parts. Flora Henderson married last year and moved to Kansas. Flora Whitmore is about 60 years old, lives on the edge of town. Then there is Flora Sutton, but she left town with her family about 3 months back." Cole felt his hope deflating. "Where did the Sutton family go?" "Cannot say for certain. Somewhere west, I heard. Might have been Nebraska territory, might have been further. They were heading to farm country, that much I know." Cole thanked him and stepped back out into the sunlight. 3 months was a long time. The trail would be cold by now. But something in those painted eyes kept calling to him. He could not just let it go. He spent the rest of the day asking around Council Bluffs. The banker had heard of the Suttons, but did not know where they had gone. The postmaster said they had not left a forwarding address. The minister at the church remembered Flora Sutton as a sweet girl with a lovely voice who sang in the choir. But he, too, had no idea where the family had relocated. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Cole found himself at the edge of town, standing in front of a small white house with a neat garden. This was where Mrs. Whitmore lived, the 60-year-old Flora. He knocked on the door, and when it opened, he saw immediately that this was not the woman in the portrait, but Mrs. Whitmore was kind and invited him in for coffee. "The Suttons were good people," she said as she poured him a cup. "Samuel and Margaret Sutton had 3 daughters. Flora was the middle child, about 20 years old if I recall correctly. pretty thing with a good head on her shoulders. They lost their farm to the bank and decided to try their luck out west. Margaret was not well, I remember that. Some kind of lung trouble. Cole felt a chill run through him. The older woman in the portrait, with the same features as Flora. Did Margaret make it? Mrs. Whitmore's face fell. I heard she passed not long after they left. Poor thing. It was the journey that did it, I suspect. Too much strain on her body. Cole looked down at the locket in his hands. A dying woman had given this to her daughter, and now Flora was somewhere out there, possibly without even this last piece of her mother. The determination in his chest grew stronger. You have any idea which direction they went? Any friends or relatives they might have mentioned, Mrs. Whitmore thought for a long moment. I recall Margaret mentioning a sister once. Nancy, I think her name was. Nancy Cooper. She lived somewhere in Nebraska Territory, near Omaha maybe, or one of the smaller towns around there, but I cannot be certain. It was not much, but it was something. Cole thanked her profusely and headed to the boarding house where he had planned to stay the night. In his small room, he sat on the edge of the narrow bed and opened the locket again, studying Flora's face in the lamplight. She had delicate features, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth, and those eyes that seemed to hold both sadness and hope. He wondered what she was doing right now, if she even knew she had lost the locket, if she mourned its absence. The next morning, Cole was up before dawn. He had made his decision. He would find Flora Sutton and return her locket, no matter how long it took. He settled his affairs in Council Bluffs, arranged for his ranch hand to watch over his property, and set out west toward Nebraska Territory. The journey from Council Bluffs to Omaha was about 40 miles, mostly following the Mormon trail that so many had traveled before. Cole made good time on his horse, a sturdy mare named Bess, who had never let him down. The landscape was a mix of rolling prairie and farmland, with the occasional stand of cottonwood trees marking where water could be found. Omaha was larger than Council Bluffs, a real city with brick buildings and paved streets in the downtown area. Cole felt a bit overwhelmed as he navigated through the crowds, but he had a mission. He started with the county records office, hoping to find any mention of the Cooper family. The clerk was a thin man with ink-stained fingers who looked annoyed at the interruption. "Cooper is a common name," he said flatly. "Do you have any more information?" Nancy Cooper, possibly married to someone with that surname. She would have a sister named Margaret Sutton, or she did until recently. Margaret passed away a few months back. The clerk sighed but began pulling out ledgers. After nearly an hour of searching, he found something. "There is a Daniel and Nancy Cooper who own a farm in Douglas County, about 15 miles northwest of here, near a settlement called Elkhorn. That could be your people." Cole felt his heart leap. "How do I get there?" The clerk gave him directions, and Cole immediately set out. The afternoon was hot, the sun beating down mercilessly as he rode through the Nebraska countryside. The land here was different from Iowa, more open somehow, with a wildness that reminded him why they called this the frontier. He passed by homesteads carved out of the prairie, saw families working their fields, children playing in yards while their mothers hung laundry. By the time he reached Elkhorn, the sun was beginning to lower in the sky. It was barely a settlement, just a handful of buildings clustered around a crossroads. The general store doubled as the post office, and the proprietor was able to direct him to the Cooper farm. Cole's hands were sweating as he rode up the dirt path to the farmhouse. It was a modest structure but well-maintained, with a barn and several outbuildings. Chickens scattered as he approached, and a dog started barking. A man emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on his trousers. "Can I help you?" the man called out. Cole dismounted. "I am looking for Nancy Cooper. I have something that belongs to her niece, Flora Sutton." The man's expression shifted, becoming guarded. "I am Daniel Cooper. Nancy is my wife. What is this about?" I found a locket on the trail. "It has Flora's name inscribed in it. I am trying to return it to her." Daniel studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Come inside. Nancy will want to hear this." The farmhouse interior was simple but comfortable. Nancy Cooper was a woman in her 40s with graying hair and kind eyes that reminded Cole of the portrait in the locket. She was kneading bread dough at the kitchen table when they entered, and she looked up with surprise. "Nancy, this man says he found something belonging to Flora," Daniel said. Cole pulled out the locket and held it out. Nancy's hands flew to her mouth, leaving flour marks on her cheeks. "Oh my heavens," she whispered. "Margaret's locket. Flora was heartbroken when she lost that." "So you know where she is?" Cole asked, hope surging through him. Nancy wiped her hands on her apron and took the locket gently, opening it to look at the portraits. Her eyes filled with tears. "My poor sister," she said softly. Then she looked up at Cole. "Flora and her family stayed with us for a few weeks after Margaret passed." It was here, actually, that Flora realized the locket was gone. She was devastated. It was the last thing her mother gave her before she died. "Where are they now?" "They moved on about 6 weeks ago. Samuel wanted to get further west to find better farmland." "They are in Custer County now, near a little town called Broken Bow. It is a hard journey from here, young man. About 150 miles, much of it rough country." Cole did not hesitate. "I will go. She needs to have this back." Nancy looked at him with curiosity. "Why are you doing this?" "You could have sold that locket or just kept it. Most folks would not go to such trouble." Cole looked down at the locket in Nancy's hands, at the face of the young woman who had haunted his thoughts for the past 2 days. "It is the right thing to do," he said simply. "And I think maybe I need to meet her." Nancy smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. "You rode all this way without even knowing what she looks like in person." "I know her eyes," Cole said, then felt his face heat up. "I mean, from the portrait, they look kind." Nancy handed the locket back to him. "Keep it safe, and tell Flora that her Aunt Nancy sends her love. Tell her that Margaret would be proud of her for being strong." Daniel drew Cole a map and gave him advice about the route. "The road is not always well marked," he warned. "You will be following the Loop River for much of the way. There are a few settlements where you can stop for supplies, but it is sparse country. Keep your wits about you." Cole stayed the night in their barn, and Nancy packed him food for the journey. As he lay in the hayloft, looking up at the stars through the cracks in the roof, he thought about what he was doing. It seemed crazy when he really considered it. Riding hundreds of miles to return a locket to a woman he had never met. But it did not feel crazy. It felt like the most important thing he had ever done. The journey to Broken Bow took him 4 days. He followed the Loop River as Daniel had instructed, riding through prairie that seemed to stretch endlessly in all directions. The grass was tall and golden in the late summer heat, moving in waves when the wind blew. He saw herds of pronghorn antelope in the distance, and once, a small group of Pawnee hunters who watched him pass but made no move to approach. He stopped in small settlements along the way, places that were barely more than a trading post and a few homesteads. At each one he asked if anyone knew of the Sutton family, but no one did. He was heading in the right direction. He had to trust that. The landscape grew more rugged as he traveled west. The flat prairie gave way to rolling hills and deep valleys carved by water. He crossed creeks and tributaries, sometimes having to search for safe fording spots. At night, he made camp under the vast Nebraska sky, the Milky Way spreading above him like a river of light. The locket stayed in his pocket, a constant reminder of his purpose. On the 4th day, as the sun was reaching its zenith, He crested a hill and saw Broken Bow in the valley below. It was smaller than Elkhorn, just a main street with a few businesses and houses scattered around the outskirts. But it was a real town, growing in the way that all frontier towns grew, with the hope and sweat of people trying to make a life. Cole rode down into town, his body aching from days in the saddle. The first place he stopped was the saloon, not for a drink, but because saloons were where information flowed. The bartender was a burly man with a thick beard who eyed Cole's trail-worn appearance with understanding. "Looking for someone," Cole said. "The Sutton family. Samuel Sutton, his daughters Flora and her sisters. They came here about 6 weeks ago." The bartender nodded. "I know Samuel. Good man, keeps to himself mostly. He took over the old Henderson place about 5 miles east of town. The farm was abandoned last year after the grasshoppers came through. Samuel is trying to make it work again. 5 miles. After all this distance, all these days, Flora was just 5 miles away." Cole felt his pulse quicken. "Much obliged," he said. "You want something to eat first?" "You look like you have been riding hard." Cole shook his head. "I need to finish this first." The bartender gave him directions, and Cole was back on Bess within minutes. The 5 miles seemed to take forever and no time at all. His mind raced with what he would say, how he would explain himself. Would she think he was crazy? Would she be grateful or disturbed that a stranger had tracked her across 2 counties? The Sutton farm appeared on the horizon, and Cole's mouth went dry. It was a small place, a house that looked like it needed work, a barn that leaned slightly to one side, fields that were being tilled and planted with late-season crops. Someone was working in the garden near the house, a figure in a long dress and bonnet. Cole rode up slowly, not wanting to startle anyone. A man emerged from the barn, probably Samuel Sutton. He was in his late 40s with broad shoulders and a weathered face. He held a pitchfork loosely, but his posture was cautious. "Can I help you, stranger?" Cole dismounted, very aware of the woman in the garden who had stopped working and was watching. "I am looking for Flora Sutton. My name is Cole Zimmerman. I have something that belongs to her." Samuel's eyes narrowed. "What kind of something?" Cole pulled out the locket, holding it up so it caught the light. He heard a gasp from the garden, and then the woman was running toward him, pulling off her bonnet as she came. Dark hair tumbled down around her shoulders, and when she got close enough, Cole saw the eyes from the portrait looking at him in wonder and disbelief. "My locket," Flora breathed, stopping a few feet from him. "You found my locket." She was even more beautiful in person. The portrait had not captured the warmth of her skin. The way her eyes seemed to reflect every emotion, the fullness of her lips that were parted in shock. She was small, coming up only to his shoulder, but there was a strength in the way she stood, in the set of her shoulders. "I found it on the trail near Council Bluffs," Cole said, his voice rougher than he intended. "About a week ago. I have been tracking you ever since." Flora's hand trembled as she reached out, and Cole placed the locket gently in her palm. She cradled it like it was made of spun glass, tears streaming down her face. "I thought it was gone forever," she whispered. "I thought I had lost the last piece of my mother." Samuel had come up beside them, his expression softened. "You rode all the way from Council Bluffs to return this?" "Through Council Bluffs to Omaha, then to Elkhorn, and now here," Cole confirmed. "Your sister-in-law Nancy sends her love. She told me how much this meant to Flora." Flora looked up at him, her eyes still swimming with tears. "I do not understand. Why would you do this? You do not even know me." Cole met her gaze and felt something click into place inside him, like a key turning in a lock. "I looked at your picture every day for the past week. I felt like I knew you. I knew you needed this back." For a long moment, they just stood there, looking at each other while the Nebraska wind whispered through the grass around them. Samuel cleared his throat. Well, the least we can do is offer you a meal and a place to rest. You look like you have been traveling hard. Flora seemed to shake herself out of her daze. Yes, of course. Please come inside. You must be exhausted. The interior of the house was sparse but clean. Flora's two sisters appeared from the back room, introduced as Faith, who was 22, and Frances, who was 17. They looked at Cole with open curiosity, whispering to each other when they thought he could not hear. Flora busied herself preparing food, and Cole noticed how she kept touching the locket, which now hung around her neck where it belonged. She had regained her composure, but her hand still shook slightly as she sliced bread and ladled stew into a bowl. "Tell us about yourself, Mr. Zimmerman," Samuel said as they sat down at the table. "What do you do when you are not tracking people across the territory?" Cole told them about his ranch near Council Bluffs, about losing his father and trying to keep the operation running. He found himself talking more than he usually did, perhaps because Flora kept looking at him with those remarkable eyes, perhaps because it felt good to share his story with people who seemed genuinely interested. "It must be lonely," Flora said softly, "running a ranch by yourself." "It is," Cole admitted, "but someone has to do it. It was my father's dream, and now it is mine." After the meal, Samuel showed Cole to the barn where he could bed down for the night. "You are welcome to stay a few days if you need to rest before heading back," Samuel offered. "It is the least we can do after what you have done." Cole thanked him, but once he was alone in the barn, he found he could not sleep. His mind was full of Flora, of the way she had looked at him, of the sound of her voice. He had accomplished what he set out to do. The locket was returned. He should be planning his journey home, but the thought of leaving made his chest ache. As the house grew dark and quiet, Cole heard the barn door creak open. He sat up, hand instinctively going to his belt, but then he saw Flora silhouetted in the moonlight. "I am sorry to disturb you," she said quietly. "I could not sleep. I wanted to thank you properly." Cole stood up, very aware that his shirt was unbuttoned and his hair was mussed. "You already thanked me." Flora stepped further into the barn, and in the silver light, he could see she was still wearing the locket. "No, I do not think you understand what this means to me. My mother gave me this 2 days before she died. She told me that whenever I felt lost or alone, I should hold it and remember that I was loved. When I lost it, I felt like I had lost her all over again, and you brought her back to me." Her voice broke on the last words, and without thinking, Cole crossed the space between them and pulled her into his arms. She came willingly, pressing her face against his chest, and he felt her tears soaking through his shirt. He held her while she cried, one hand stroking her hair, the other wrapped securely around her back. "I am sorry," she gasped after a few minutes, pulling back and wiping her eyes. "I have been trying to be strong for my father and sisters, but it has been so hard." "You do not have to be strong all the time," Cole said softly, reluctantly releasing her. "Sometimes it is okay to let someone else carry the weight for a while." Flora looked up at him, and in that moment, something passed between them. It was like lightning without the thunder, a sudden connection that made the air feel charged. "Why did you really come all this way?" she whispered. "Please tell me the truth." Cole took a shaky breath. "Because from the moment I saw your picture, I could not stop thinking about you. Because I felt like I knew you, like I had been waiting for you. I know that sounds crazy, I know we just met, but I had to find you, Flora, not just to return the locket, but to see if what I felt was real." Flora's hand came up to touch the locket at her throat. "And is it real?" "Yes," Cole said without hesitation. "More real than anything I have ever felt." Flora closed the distance between them, rising up on her toes, and kissed him. It was soft and sweet and full of promise. Cole's arms came around her again, pulling her close. deepening the kiss. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "I should go back to the house," Flora said, but she made no move to leave. "If my father finds me out here." "I would never do anything to dishonor you," Cole said firmly. "But Flora, I need you to know that I want to see you again. I want to court you properly if you will have me." Flora smiled, and it was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. "I would like that very much. But you live in Iowa and I live here. How would that work?" "I will figure it out," Cole promised. "I will come back as often as I can, and maybe if things work out between us, we can figure out something more permanent." Flora kissed him once more, then slipped out of the barn and back to the house. Cole lay back down in the hay, but sleep was even more impossible now. His lips still tingled from her kiss, his heart was racing, and his mind was spinning with possibilities. The next morning, Samuel pulled Cole aside before breakfast. "My daughter came in very late last night," he said, his tone neutral. "And she was smiling in a way I have not seen since her mother died. I assume you two talked." Cole met his eyes squarely. "Yes, sir, and I asked permission to court her. I should have asked you first, and I apologize for that." Samuel studied him for a long moment. "You rode across 2 counties to return a locket to a woman you had never met. That tells me something about your character, but I need to know your intentions are honorable." "They are, sir. I have never been more serious about anything in my life." Samuel nodded slowly. "Then you have my permission. But know this, Cole Zimmerman, if you hurt my daughter, distance will not protect you from me." "I understand, sir, and I promise you hurting her is the last thing I would ever want to do." Over the next few days, Cole stayed at the Sutton farm, helping Samuel with repairs and getting to know the family. He and Flora spent every possible moment together, talking and laughing and falling deeper in love. She told him about her childhood in Council Bluffs, about her dreams of becoming a teacher, about the heartbreak of losing her mother. He told her about the loneliness of running the ranch alone, about his own dreams of building something lasting, about the emptiness he had felt until he found that locket on the trail. On the third evening, as they sat together watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Flora said, "I do not want you to go. I know you have to, but I do not want you to." Cole took her hand, intertwining their fingers. "I do not want to go either. But I have responsibilities back home. The ranch, the livestock, I cannot just abandon them." "I know," Flora said quietly, "and I have responsibilities here too. My father needs me, my sisters need me. We are just getting settled. So what do we do?" Flora turned to look at him, and the love in her eyes made his breath catch. "We trust that this is meant to be. You go home, take care of your ranch. I will be here, helping my family, and you come back when you can. We will make it work, Cole, I believe that." Cole kissed her, pouring all his feelings into it. "I will write to you every week, and I will be back before you know it. I promise." The morning he left was one of the hardest of Cole's life. Flora walked with him to where Bess was waiting, and they held each other for a long time. "I am going to miss you so much," she whispered against his chest. "I am going to miss you too. But this is not goodbye, Flora. This is just the beginning for us." The journey back to Council Bluffs felt twice as long as the journey out, even though Cole pushed harder, rode longer each day. He was torn between the life he had built in Iowa and the woman who had stolen his heart in Nebraska. At night, he would take out the piece of ribbon Flora had given him as a keepsake, and the sight of it would renew his determination. When he finally reached his ranch, his hand Pete was surprised to see him. "Thought you might have run off for good," Pete said with a grin. "How did your search go?" "I found her," Cole said, and could not keep the smile off his face. "And Pete, she is everything." True to his word, Cole wrote to Flora every week. He told her about his days, about the ranch work, about how empty the house felt without her in it. Her letters back were full of warmth and humor, telling him about the progress on the farm, about her sister's antics, about how much she missed him. But letters were not enough. After 6 weeks, Cole made the journey back to Broken Bow. Flora ran out to meet him when she saw him riding up, and he caught her in his arms and spun her around, both of them laughing with joy. That visit lasted 4 days, and by the time he left, Cole knew with absolute certainty that he wanted to marry Flora. But he also knew he needed to be practical. How could they build a life together when they lived so far apart? The answer came from an unexpected source. On his 3rd trip to Broken Bow in late October, as the weather was turning colder, Samuel sat down with him after dinner. "I can see that you two are serious about each other," he said. "And I can see that this back and forth is wearing on both of you." "It is," Cole admitted. "But I do not know what the solution is. I cannot ask Flora to leave you and her sisters, not when you are still getting established here. But I also cannot abandon my ranch." Samuel was quiet for a moment. "What if you did not have to choose? What if we combined our operations?" Cole looked at him in surprise. "What do you mean?" "My farm is small, and honestly, it is a struggle. The soil is decent but not great, and we do not have enough livestock to really make a go of it. Your ranch, from what you have told me, has good land and good stock, but it is too much for one man to handle alone. What if we became partners? You could sell your place in Iowa, and we could use that money to expand here. Or better yet, what if you kept the Iowa ranch and hired a proper manager for it, and you came here to help me build this place up? Either way, we would be family, working together." Cole's mind raced with the possibilities. "That could work," he said slowly. "I have been thinking about hiring a full-time manager anyway. A man I know in Council Bluffs has been interested in managing a cattle operation. And if I am being honest, the idea of starting fresh somewhere new has appeal, especially if it means being with Flora." "Then we have a deal," Samuel said, extending his hand. "Welcome to the family, son." That night, Cole proposed to Flora under the stars. He did not have a fancy ring, just a simple band of silver that he had commissioned from a metalsmith in Council Bluffs, but Flora did not care. She said yes before he even finished asking the question, throwing her arms around his neck and kissing him until they were both dizzy. "I was starting to think you would never ask," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "I wanted to make sure I could give you the life you deserve," Cole said. "I wanted to have a plan, a future to offer you. Cole Zimmerman, you are my plan and my future. Everything else is just details." They were married in January of 1878 in the little church in Broken Bow. It was a small ceremony, just family and a few friends from town, but it was perfect. Flora wore a simple white dress that her Aunt Nancy had sent from Elkhorn, and she carried wildflowers that Faith had somehow found despite the winter cold. Cole wore his best suit, the one his father had left him, and when Flora walked down the aisle toward him, he had to blink back tears. The preacher spoke about love and commitment, about the sacred bond of marriage, but Cole barely heard the words. He was too focused on Flora, on the way her hand trembled slightly in his, on the love shining in her eyes. When the preacher finally said, "You may kiss your bride," Cole pulled Flora close and kissed her with all the love and passion he had been holding back for months. The celebration afterward was held at the Sutton farm, which was looking much better than it had when Cole first arrived. He had spent every visit making improvements, and Samuel had worked tirelessly. The house had been repaired, the barn was now standing straight, and the fields were ready for spring planting. As Cole danced with his new wife, holding her close while a fiddle player sawed out a cheerful tune, he marveled at how much his life had changed. Less than 6 months ago, He had been a lonely rancher with nothing to look forward to but more hard work and empty evenings. Now he had a wife, a new family, and a future that seemed bright with possibility. "What are you thinking about?" Flora asked, looking up at him with those eyes that had captivated him from the first moment he saw their painted image. "I am thinking about how finding that locket was the best thing that ever happened to me," Cole said honestly. "I am thinking about how grateful I am that you lost it, even though I know how much pain it caused you." Flora touched the locket at her throat. She wore it every day, as she would for the rest of her life. "I am not sure I lost it," she said thoughtfully. "Maybe my mother knew what she was doing when she gave it to me. Maybe she knew it would lead me to you." Cole kissed her forehead. "Then I owe your mother a debt I can never repay." The first year of their marriage was not easy. Farming in Nebraska was hard, unpredictable work. There were days when the sun beat down mercilessly and the crops withered. There were nights when the wind howled like a living thing and they huddled in the house wondering if the roof would hold. There were moments of doubt, of exhaustion, of wondering if they had made the right choice. But through it all, Cole and Flora had each other. They worked side by side in the fields, their hands blistered and their backs aching. They lay together at night, planning and dreaming about the future they were building. They laughed together over simple meals, found joy in small victories, and held each other through the disappointments. Cole proved to be as skilled at farming as he was at ranching. Under his and Samuel's combined efforts, the farm began to thrive. They brought in better seed stock, improved the irrigation, and slowly expanded their holdings. Cole's ranch in Iowa continued to operate under the management of the man he had hired, and the income from that supplemented what they were making in Nebraska. In the spring of 1879, Flora told Cole she was expecting their first child. He was overcome with emotion, holding her close and whispering promises about the life they would give this baby. They spent the summer preparing, Cole building a cradle with his own hands while Flora sewed tiny clothes and blankets. Their son was born in November, during the first snowfall of the season. It was a long, difficult labor, and Cole paced the kitchen floor while Faith and a midwife attended to Flora in the bedroom. When he finally heard the cry of his child, he felt his knees go weak with relief. Samuel clapped him on the shoulder, grinning. "Congratulations, Cole, you are a father." They named him Matthew Samuel Zimmerman, after both their fathers. He had Flora's dark hair and Cole's light eyes, and from the first moment Cole held him, he was completely smitten. Flora recovered quickly from the birth, and she took to motherhood with the same grace and strength she brought to everything else. Cole would often find her sitting in the rocking chair he had made, nursing Matthew while wearing her mother's locket, and the sight never failed to move him. "Your grandmother would have loved you," Flora would whisper to the baby. "She would have thought you were the most perfect thing in the world." The farm continued to prosper. By 1881, they had expanded significantly, adding more acreage and building a larger house to accommodate their growing family. Faith had married a young farmer from a neighboring property, and Francis, now 21, was being courted by the schoolteacher from town. Samuel, meanwhile, seemed to have found new purpose in being a grandfather. He doted on Matthew, teaching him about the land and animals even though the boy was still too young to understand. In the summer of 1882, Flora gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Margaret Rose, after Flora's mother, and because Flora said she smelled as sweet as a rose. Matthew, now almost 3, was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything. Cole found himself with a family, a real family, and sometimes he still could not believe his good fortune. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset while the children slept inside, Flora leaned her head on Cole's shoulder. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Giving up your ranch in Iowa, moving out here, taking on all of this?" Cole wrapped his arm around her, pulling her closer. "Not for a single moment. Flora, you and these children are the best thing that ever happened to me. This life we have built together is more than I ever dreamed of having." "I am glad," Flora said softly, "because I cannot imagine my life without you. Sometimes I think about that day you rode up to our farm with my locket, and I wonder what would have happened if you had just sold it or thrown it away. We never would have met. We never would have had this." "I would have found you somehow," Cole said with certainty. "Maybe not the same way, maybe not as quickly, but I believe we were meant to find each other. That locket was just the path that led me to you." As the years passed, their family and farm continued to grow. In 1884, they had another son, Thomas Cole, and in 1886, a daughter named Catherine Faith. The house was always full of noise and laughter, of children running and playing, of family meals where everyone talked at once. Samuel remained with them, a beloved grandfather who told stories and helped with the children, and continued to work the farm even as his hair turned completely gray. Faith and her husband had 3 children of their own, and they lived close enough that the cousins were always together. Frances married her school teacher and moved to a nearby town where he had taken a position as headmaster. The family remained close, gathering for holidays and celebrations, supporting each other through hard times and good. The farm became one of the most successful in Custer County. Cole and Samuel's partnership had proven to be ideal, combining Cole's ranching expertise with Samuel's farming knowledge. They diversified, raising both crops and livestock, and they had a reputation for fair dealing and quality products. Other farmers would often come to them for advice, and Cole found himself becoming a respected member of the community. But through all the success, all the growth and change, what mattered most to Cole was Flora. Every morning he woke up next to her and felt grateful. Every evening he held her in his arms and thanked whatever forces in the universe had led him to that locket on the trail. She was his partner in every sense of the word, working beside him in the fields, managing the household, raising their children, and loving him with a steadiness that never wavered. Flora continued to wear her mother's locket every day. She would touch it when she was worried or sad, and Cole knew she was finding comfort in the memory of her mother. When their children asked about it, she would tell them the story of how their father had traveled across 2 counties to return it to her, and how that journey had brought them together. In the spring of 1890, Cole was working in the barn when Matthew, now 10 years old, came running up to him. "Papa, Mama says to come quick. Grandfather Samuel is not feeling well." Cole's heart dropped. He rushed to the house to find Samuel sitting in his chair, looking pale and clutching his chest. Flora was already there, holding her father's hand, tears streaming down her face. They sent for the doctor, but by the time he arrived, Samuel had passed away peacefully, surrounded by his family. The loss hit all of them hard. Samuel had been the foundation of their family, the one who had brought them all together. They buried him in the small cemetery outside Broken Bow, with a headstone that read, "Samuel Sutton, beloved father, grandfather, and friend, a man of the land." In the weeks that followed, Cole watched Flora grieve for her father. She would sit in Samuel's chair, holding her locket and crying quietly. Cole gave her space when she needed it and held her when she wanted comfort. Slowly, she began to heal, finding solace in their children and in the farm that Samuel had helped build. "He had a good life," Flora said one evening as they lay in bed. "He lost my mother, but he got to see all of us settled and happy. He got to know his grandchildren. He died doing what he loved, working the land. I think he would have wanted it that way. He was proud of you, Cole said, stroking her hair. He told me so many times. He said you were the strongest person he knew. Flora snuggled closer to him. I am only strong because I have you. I could not have survived losing both my mother and father without you by my side. As their children grew older, Cole and Flora made sure to tell them the story of how they met, emphasizing the importance of doing the right thing even when it is difficult. Matthew, in particular, loved to hear about his father's journey, asking for more details each time. He wanted to know exactly which trails Cole had taken, what the weather had been like, what he had been thinking during those long days of travel. Why did you decide to look for her? Matthew asked one evening when he was 12. You could have just kept the locket. Cole looked at his son, seeing so much of Flora in his features. Because it was not mine to keep. And because sometimes, son, you have to trust your instincts. Something told me that finding the owner of that locket was important, and I was right. It led me to your mother and to all of you. Thomas, 2 years younger than Matthew, piped up. So if you had not found the locket, we would not exist, Flora laughed. I suppose that is true. You can thank your grandmother's locket for your existence. In 1895, when Matthew was 16, he asked Cole if he could travel to Iowa to see the ranch where Cole had grown up. Cole agreed, and they made the journey together, father and son. The ranch was still operating under the manager Cole had hired years ago, a good man who had kept the place thriving. Matthew was fascinated by everything, asking endless questions about Cole's childhood, about his father, about the cattle business. You ever miss it? Matthew asked as they rode across the Iowa prairie. This place, I mean. Do you wish you had stayed? Cole looked around at the familiar landscape, at the land he had once thought was his entire world. No, he said honestly. This place will always be part of me, but my home is in Nebraska with your mother and you children. That is where my heart is. When they returned to Broken Bow, Flora was waiting for them. She ran into Cole's arms like they had been separated for months instead of weeks, and Cole held her tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. I missed you so much, she whispered. I missed you too. And I realized something on this trip. That ranch in Iowa, it is just property. It is not home. Home is wherever you are. In 1898, their oldest daughter, Margaret Rose, now 16, fell in love with a young man from town. His name was David Wright, and he was the son of the general store owner. Cole watched his daughter with her young man and was reminded of himself and Flora at that age, so full of hope and dreams. He approved of David, who was hardworking and respectful, and when the young man came to ask permission to court Margaret Rose, Cole gave his blessing. But remember, Cole told him sternly, I rode across 2 counties for this girl's grandmother. I would ride across the entire country for her. David nodded seriously. I understand, sir, and I promise to treat her with the respect and love she deserves. Margaret Rose and David were married in 1899, and Cole gave his daughter away with both pride and sadness. She looked so much like Flora had on their wedding day, and when he placed her hand in David's, he had to blink back tears. But he was also happy, because he could see that his daughter had found what he and Flora had. Real, lasting love. As the new century approached, the farm was thriving more than ever. They had weathered droughts and harsh winters, economic downturns and personal losses, but they had survived and prospered. Cole was 47 years old now, his hair starting to show gray at the temples, but he felt stronger than ever. Flora, at 43, was as beautiful to him as she had been the first day he saw her. Maybe even more so because now every line on her face told a story they had lived together. On New Year's Eve of 1899, as the 19th century gave way to the 20th, Cole and Flora stood on their porch watching fireworks that someone had set off in town. Their children were inside, the older ones talking about what the new century would bring, the younger ones playing games. Cole wrapped his arms around Flora from behind and she leaned back against him. 22 years, Flora said softly. 22 years since you found my locket. 22 years since you changed my life. You changed my life too, Cole reminded her. Before you, I was just going through the motions. You gave me purpose, gave me a reason to build something lasting. Flora turned in his arms to face him. The locket gleamed at her throat, as it always did, a constant reminder of where they had started. Do you know what I think about when I look at this? She asked. Your mother. Yes, but also you. I think about how you could have passed right by it on that trail. How you could have decided it was not worth the effort to find me. How everything had to align perfectly for us to find each other. It makes me believe in fate, Cole. It makes me believe we were meant to be. Cole kissed her, soft and sweet, and behind them their children started cheering as the new century officially began. We were meant to be, he agreed. And I would do it all again, every mile, every struggle, every moment of doubt, because it all led me here to you, to this life we have built together. The years continued to roll by, marked by the changing seasons and the rhythms of farm life. Thomas, their third child, took over much of the daily operations of the farm as Cole got older, showing the same dedication and skill that Cole had always demonstrated. Catherine Faith, their youngest, surprised everyone by becoming a teacher, opening a small schoolhouse on their property to educate not just her own nieces and nephews, but also children from neighboring farms. In 1905, Cole and Flora became grandparents for the first time when Margaret Rose gave birth to a daughter. They named her Flora Margaret, and when Cole held her for the first time, he was overwhelmed with emotion. This tiny person was a continuation of their love story, proof that what he and Flora had built would last beyond their own lives. She has your eyes, Cole told Flora as they admired their granddaughter together. And your strength, Flora replied, watching the baby grip Cole's finger with surprising force. More grandchildren followed over the years. Matthew married a girl from Omaha and brought her back to Broken Bow, where they built a house on a portion of the farm land. Thomas married his childhood sweetheart, and they took over the original farmhouse that Samuel had worked so hard to establish. The family compound grew, with houses and barns and fields full of children and animals and life. Through it all, Cole and Flora remained at the center, the foundation upon which everything else was built. They had moved into a smaller house on the property once Thomas and his wife took over the main house, a cozy place that was just right for the two of them. Cole had built it with his own hands, making sure every detail was perfect for Flora. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch of their little house, holding hands and watching the sun set over the land they had worked so hard to cultivate. Sometimes they talked, reminiscing about the past or discussing their children and grandchildren. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence, the kind of silence that only comes from decades of knowing someone completely. In 1910, on their 32nd wedding anniversary, Cole surprised Flora with a portrait. He had commissioned an artist to paint them together, standing in front of their farm with all their children and grandchildren around them. When Flora saw it, she burst into tears. "It is beautiful," she said, touching the canvas gently. "It is everything I never knew I wanted." Cole wrapped his arms around her. "I wanted to capture this moment, this life we have built. I wanted there to be a record of what we created together." Flora touched her locket, then looked up at Cole with eyes full of love. "My mother would have loved to see this. She would have been so proud." "She can see it," Cole said softly. I believe that. And I believe she knows that her gift to you, that locket, ended up giving you so much more than either of you could have imagined. As they grew older, their love only deepened. They had weathered so many storms together, both literal and metaphorical. They had buried friends and family, survived economic hardships, adapted to changing times. But through everything, they had each other. Cole still felt a thrill when Flora smiled at him. Flora still felt safe and cherished when Cole held her hand. In 1915, they celebrated their golden anniversary. The entire family gathered for a huge celebration, with children and grandchildren and even some great-grandchildren running around. The farm was full of life and laughter, with tables laden with food and music playing. Cole and Flora danced together as they had on their wedding day, though their steps were slower now, more careful. 50 years, Flora marveled as they swayed to the music. Half a century together. Best 50 years of my life, Cole said, meaning every word. And if I am blessed with another 50, I would want to spend every single one with you. Flora kissed him, right there in front of everyone, and their children and grandchildren applauded. Matthew stood up to give a toast. His own children gathered around him. To my parents, he said, raising his glass, who showed us all what real love looks like, who built not just a farm but a legacy, who proved that sometimes the smallest things like a lost locket can lead to the greatest adventures. We love you both, and we are grateful every day that Grandfather Cole was stubborn enough to ride across 2 counties for a woman he had never met. Everyone drank to that, and Cole looked around at the sea of faces, all of them connected to him and Flora, all of them part of the family they had created. It was overwhelming and wonderful and humbling all at once. As the celebration wound down and the evening grew late, Cole and Flora slipped away to their little house. They sat on the porch in their familiar spot, and Flora took off her locket, opening it to look at the portraits inside. The paint had faded over the years, but the faces were still visible. Flora as a young woman and her mother Margaret. You remember what I told you the first night we met? Flora asked. In the barn when I came to thank you. You told me your mother said that whenever you felt lost or alone, you should hold the locket and remember that you were loved. Flora nodded. I still do that sometimes. But now, when I hold it, I think of you too. I think of how you brought me more love than I ever thought possible. Cole pulled her close, and they sat together under the stars, just as they had done thousands of times before. The locket rested between them, a tangible link to the past, and all the love that had flowed from that one chance discovery on a dusty trail. The years continued, bringing both joy and sorrow. In 1918, they lost faith to influenza during the terrible epidemic that swept the country. It was devastating, and Flora grieved deeply for her sister. But the family rallied around each other, supporting one another through the loss. Faith's children came to stay with Cole and Flora for a while, and the distraction of caring for them helped ease the pain. Frances, the youngest of the Sutton sisters, remained close to Cole and Flora, visiting often with her own large family. She would always remark on how lucky Flora had been that Cole found that locket, how it had changed not just Flora's life but all of their lives. If you had not lost it, you never would have met Cole, Frances would say, and this whole wonderful family would not exist. It is amazing how one small thing can change everything. As Cole entered his 70s, he began to slow down physically. His joints ached, and he could not work the long hours he once had. But his mind was as sharp as ever, and he spent his time teaching his grandchildren and great-grandchildren about the land, about life, about the importance of love and family. Flora, too, showed her age, her dark hair now completely white, her movements more careful. But she was still beautiful to Cole, still the woman whose portrait had captivated him all those years ago. One spring morning in 1925, Cole woke to find Flora already up and sitting by the window. She was holding her locket, turning it over in her hands. When she heard him stir, she turned and smiled. "Good morning, my love," she said softly. Cole got up and joined her, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "What are you thinking about?" "About how much I love you," Flora said simply. "About how grateful I am for every day we have had together. About how losing my mother's locket was the worst and best thing that ever happened to me." Cole kissed the top of her head. "I love you too, more than words can say." They spent that day together, just the two of them, walking slowly around the farm and reminiscing. They visited the graves of Samuel and Faith in the cemetery. They stood in the fields where they had worked side by side for so many years. They sat by the creek where their children had played. As the sun began to set, they made their way back to their little house. That night, Cole woke suddenly to find Flora's side of the bed empty. He got up, his heart pounding, and found her on the porch in her nightgown, looking up at the stars. He went to her immediately, wrapping another blanket around both of them. "Flora, are you all right?" She leaned back against him. "I am fine. I just could not sleep. I was thinking about my mother, about how she knew she was dying when she gave me this locket. I was thinking about how much life I have lived since then, how many wonderful things I have experienced because of you." "Flora," Cole said, a sudden fear gripping him. "You are not." "I am old, Cole, we both are, and I am tired, but I am not afraid, because I know that I have lived a full, beautiful life. I have loved and been loved. I have watched my children and grandchildren grow. I have spent almost 50 years with the man of my dreams. Whatever comes next, I am ready for it." "I am not ready," Cole said, his voice breaking. "I am not ready to lose you." Flora turned in his arms, reaching up to cup his face in her wrinkled hands. "You will never lose me. I will always be with you in every sunset, in every sunrise, in every face of our children and their children. And one day, when it is your time, I will be waiting for you. But until then, you have to keep living, keep loving, keep being the wonderful man you have always been." Cole held her close, and they stayed there on the porch until dawn, wrapped in each other's arms and their memories. When the sun came up, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Flora sighed with contentment. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for finding my locket, for finding me, for giving me this beautiful life." Flora lived for 5 more years, growing frailer but never losing her spirit or her love of life. In the summer of 1930, surrounded by her family, with Cole holding her hand and her mother's locket around her neck, Flora Zimmerman passed away peacefully. She was 73 years old. Cole was devastated. For the first time in over 50 years, he was alone. The house felt empty without her presence, without her voice, without her touch. He would wake in the night reaching for her, only to find cold sheets. He would go to tell her something, only to remember she was gone. But he kept living, as she had asked him to. He continued to be a presence in his children's and grandchildren's lives, offering wisdom and love. He told them stories about Flora, about their life together, about the journey that had brought them together. He made sure they understood how precious love was, how important it was to fight for it and cherish it. One day, Matthew found Cole in the barn, holding Flora's locket. After Flora died, Cole had asked to keep it, and his children had agreed. "I was just remembering," Cole said softly. "The first time I saw this, lying in the dust on that trail, I had no idea what it would mean, what it would lead to." Matthew sat down beside his father. "She loved you so much, Papa. We all saw it every single day. You too were what everyone hopes to find." "I know," Cole said. "And I am grateful for every moment I had with her, but I miss her, Matthew. I miss her more than I thought it was possible to miss another person." "She would not want you to be sad," Matthew said gently. "She would want you to remember the joy, not the loss." Cole nodded, closing the locket carefully. "You are right, and I do remember the joy. That is what keeps me going." Cole lived for 3 more years after Flora's death. He spent them surrounded by his family, watching new generations come into the world, passing on his knowledge and his stories. He made sure every single grandchild and great-grandchild knew the story of the locket, knew how their grandmother's lost treasure had led to all of them. On a crisp autumn day in 1933, Cole Zimmerman died peacefully in his sleep. He was 80 years old. They found him with Flora's locket clutched in his hand, a smile on his face. His children liked to think that he had gone to join Flora at last, that they were together again in whatever came after this life. They buried Cole next to Flora in the cemetery outside Broken Bow, under a large oak tree that provided shade in the summer and shelter in the winter. On the shared headstone, their children had inscribed, "Cole and Flora Zimmerman, united by love, separated by death, together for eternity. A journey that began with a locket and ended with a legacy." The farm continued through the generations. Cole and Flora's descendants maintained it, adding their own touches while honoring the foundation that had been laid. The portrait Cole had commissioned hung in the main house, a reminder of where they had all come from. And Flora's locket, that precious piece of silver that had started everything, was passed down through the family, from mother to daughter to granddaughter, each one learning the story of how a cowboy's determination to do the right thing had created a love that transcended time. Years later, one of their great-great-granddaughters would stand on the same land where Cole had first ridden up to return the locket. She would hold that locket in her hands, feeling the weight of history and love it carried, and she would think about her ancestors. She would think about how Cole could have ignored that flash of silver in the dust, how he could have sold it or kept it or thrown it away, how any number of choices could have led to a different outcome, but he had not. He had picked it up, looked at the portrait inside, and known that he had to find the woman who owned it. And that single act of integrity and determination had created ripples that spread across generations, creating families and love stories and lives that might never have existed otherwise. That was the power of doing the right thing. That was the power of love. And that was the legacy of Cole Zimmerman and Flora Sutton, whose love story began with a lost locket on a dusty trail in the American West, and bloomed into something beautiful and eternal that would be remembered and celebrated by their descendants for generations to come. The farm in Nebraska still stands, passed down through 5 generations now. The little house Cole built for himself and Flora has been preserved, turned into a family museum of sorts where their descendants can visit and feel close to the couple who started it all. Inside, carefully displayed, is the silver locket that brought them together. Next to it is a map showing the route Cole took from Council Bluffs through Omaha and Elkhorn to Broken Bow, a journey of over 200 miles that changed the course of so many lives. Visitors to the house, both family and friends, often comment on how romantic the story is. Young couples come to hear about Cole and Flora, hoping to find inspiration for their own relationships. The descendants take turns telling the story, making sure each detail is preserved, making sure the truth of what happened is never lost or diminished. And sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet, those who stay there swear they can hear soft laughter, the murmur of voices, the sound of 2 people who loved each other deeply finding their way back to each other, even in death. Whether it is truly the spirits of Cole and Flora or simply the power of their memory, no one can say for certain. But what is certain is that their love left an imprint on that place, on that family, on everyone who hears their story. Because in the end, Cole and Flora's story was not just about a lost locket or a long journey or even a farm in Nebraska. It was about two people who found each other against all odds, who built a life together based on love and respect and partnership, who faced every challenge hand in hand, and who left behind a legacy that would inspire generations. It was about the power of doing the right thing, even when it is difficult. It was about following your heart, even when logic says to give up. It was about believing in love, even when you have never experienced it before. And it all started with a flash of silver on a dusty trail, a cowboy who refused to ignore it, and a woman whose painted eyes captured his heart before they ever met. That was the beginning of a love story that would echo through time, a reminder that sometimes the smallest choices lead to the greatest adventures, and that true love, once found, never truly dies.